Hey, good morning. Welcome to Coffee Chat. I am Jonathan, and this morning we are continuing our weekly series, but we're going to be talking about is keeping the peace helping or hurting? That's what we're talking about today. Give me just a moment. I'll be back, and then we will get started. All right, we're back. Good morning. I am Jonathan. I am a family therapist. I am an addictions counselor, and this is Coffee Chat. And this morning, we're going to continue the series where we've been talking about are you helping or hurting? Right? Is what you're doing helping or hurting the situation? And not out of blame, but out of growth and out of understanding. We're talking about this. So, in the other topics that we have covered this week are we talked about the cycle of rescuing and then getting into resetting and then repeating, right? A cycle where it feels like you're doing the same thing over and over and over. And then we talked about reminders, right? Are your reminders and your promptings, are they helping or are they hurting the situation? And today I wanted to get into the next one, which is a big question, right? I want to talk about parents who are trying to help by keeping the peace, right? So think of it this way. Maybe you're walking on eggshells, right? You're careful about what you say, when you say it, and how you say it because you don't know how your adult child's going to react, right? Maybe they're going to become angry. Maybe they become increasingly anxious. Maybe they shut down. Maybe they cry. Maybe they isolate, right? So you have learned if I can just keep things calm, maybe we'll have a good day. But here's the question. Is keeping the peace actually helping? Or could it be helping your adult child stay stuck? Right? That's what we're talking about today. So let me give you an example of this. I was talking with a mom, and she was saying to me, I don't even think you could call it coffee. It's mainly milk and sugar. And sometimes I would even mix some hot chocolate in it. But every morning, she would make it for him. She'd bring it into his room and wake him up, and for a few minutes, they would talk. Those few minutes had become incredibly important to her because while they talked, she was always scanning, right? She was always looking. How is he doing today? Is he okay? Is this going to be a good day? Does he seem to be okay? Right? If he seemed to be okay, she'd feel that little sense of relief, right? Maybe today is the day. Maybe today he'll get out of the house. Maybe today he'll look into that class. Maybe he'll make the phone call. Maybe he'll do something, anything that moves him forward. So she'd speak positively, she'd encourage him, she'd reassure him, and she was careful, very careful, because she knew how quickly things could turn. Maybe she'd gently say, maybe later today you could look at one of those classes we talked about. And then immediately she'd see it, right? He would tense up. His voice would get louder. I know. Why do you keep bringing this up? You don't understand. And then she'd back off. Okay. We don't have to talk about this right now. because she's seen what would happen if she didn't, right? The meltdowns could be huge. The anger, the yelling, the crying. Sometimes he would even pull his hair, right? He'd completely shut down, and she was scared, right? She was worried. What if I push too hard? What if he sinks into another depression? What if he completely shuts me out? What if he hurts himself? So little by little, she learned to keep the peace. Don't push too hard, right? Don't bring it up at the wrong time. If he's having a good day, don't ruin it. If he's calm, don't upset him. And before long, all she had left was coffee. Coffee and a small connection, right? Every morning, trying to keep him calm, hoping that if he felt good enough for long enough, eventually he would move forward. And I want to be really clear here, right? Her motivation was love. She wasn't trying to keep her adult son stuck, not at all. She desperately wanted for him to have a life. But without realizing, the two of them have developed a kind of a dance, right? She'd become careful not to upset him. And whenever he became overwhelmed, angry, or shut down, the difficult conversation just stopped. And, then they'd both get some temporary relief, but nothing actually changed. His anxiety was still controlling his life. His lack of confidence was still there. And things needed to be addressed, but they weren't being addressed. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because sometimes relief is not the same thing as progress. So here's a question. Do you ever find yourself walking on eggshells around your adult child? Are you carefully deciding what you can bring up because you're worried about how they'll react? You're not alone, right? So many parents are in that place. But here's what makes this pattern so difficult. Keeping the peace works, right? If you back off, they calm down. If the yelling stops and then the tears stop and they go back to their room, then everyone can breathe again, right? And your nervous system is like, whew, we got through that. But what happened, right? Did you actually resolve anything? That's what I want you to think about. Or did you simply just make the discomfort stop? And there's a big difference between we're okay now and we're moving forward now. Sometimes what feels like a successful interaction is just really temporary relief. And if every time your child becomes distressed and the difficult conversation ends, something else can happen, right? Without anyone wanting this to happen, right? Their emotional reaction starts determining what the family can and cannot talk about, right? It's all about the emotions at that point. And this is where I see parents get really tangled up. Your adult child gets upset and you immediately think, I did this. I made them anxious. I made them feel guilty. I'm making them feel ashamed. And I really want to comment on this, right? I want to make this important distinction. There is a big difference between shaming someone and someone experiencing shame. See, if you're actually calling them names, right? If you're humiliating them, you're attacking their character, or you're intentionally trying to make them feel bad, that's different. That is shaming somebody. But calmly talking about reality is not shaming somebody, right? You are lovingly sharing the truth, right? Maybe you say, you've been out of work for 6 months and we need to talk about what the plan is. So if they feel embarrassed or feel guilty, they feel ashamed, that does not mean that you shame them. Sometimes reality is uncomfortable. Sometimes the truth about where we are compared to where we want to be, sometimes that truth hurts, right? And their feelings are real, right? You can care about their feelings You can be compassionate about those feelings, but that doesn't mean you cause them. And it also doesn't make those feelings your responsibility to remove, right? I think another piece of this that parents need to hear is working through difficult emotions is a necessary part of being a human being, right? It's a necessary part. Anxiety, guilt, regret, disappointment, embarrassment, and even their shame, right? It's important for them to learn to work through that. We don't want them to live a life where they're controlled by their emotions. But that doesn't mean every uncomfortable emotion is something that needs to be immediately removed. In fact, a lot of times it means the opposite, right? We don't want to remove those emotions immediately, right? Because emotions give us information, right? If I'm feeling guilt, it might be telling me I'm not living according to what I believe I should be doing or how I should be living, right? If I'm feeling regret, it might be telling me I made a decision I don't want to repeat, and I make a correction, right? And if I'm feeling anxiety, it might expose an area that I'm not capable yet. I'm not confident in yet, right? Insecurity, right? That's a big one, right? We don't want to feel insecure, but maybe it's showing where we have an experience where we need to develop in, right? We need more experience. We need to build our confidence. It's showing us an area that we need to work on, right? And even like that feeling of being behind, that's a big one with young adults, right? Who are stuck. If we work through that feeling, that can lead to creating motivation, right? To get moving versus I don't want to deal with it and I stay stuck. So our emotions help us grow when we learn how to work through them and respond constructively, right? But if every time those feelings appear and then somebody rushes in and makes them disappear, we don't learn how to handle them. And avoiding difficult emotions doesn't make your child better at handling them. I feel like I want to say that again. Avoiding the emotions does not make them better at handling them. It's the opposite, right? It can make those emotions overwhelming, right? Because every time you feel a strong emotion, you avoid it. It's like, I can't deal with that. And it becomes overwhelming. And so they stay stuck. So think about what happens when you constantly organize your behavior around keeping your adult child calm, right? This is on the parent. What happens when you spend all your time focused on trying to keep them calm, right? You begin taking responsibility for their emotional state. So you start thinking things like, how do I say this without upsetting them, right? Maybe I shouldn't bring this up today. She's having a good day, right? I don't want to ruin it. I'll take care of this so he doesn't get overwhelmed, right? I'll just do it, right? Eventually, you start feeling responsible, right? And you feel responsible for keeping them comfortable. But your adult child needs to learn something incredibly important. They can be uncomfortable and still be okay, right? So we want them to learn that I can be anxious and I can still make a phone call. I can feel embarrassed and still ask for help. I can feel guilty about what I've done and then I can make a different decision. Or here's a big one. I can be angry with mom and dad and still have the conversation, right? They're going to be disappointed. And when they're disappointed, we want them to figure out what they can do next. That's resilience, right? Just put it in a quick statement. That is resilience, right? Nothing bothers me. That's not what we want, right? Of course, things are going to bother them, right? We want them to be in a place where they say, this is hard, I'm uncomfortable, and I can work through it. If we're always trying to prevent the discomfort, we may unintentionally prevent some of the learning. Now, big point here. none of what I'm saying means that you become cold. That doesn't mean that you get in this place like, well, too bad you're upset, deal with it. That is not what I'm talking about. You can be incredibly compassionate. You can say things like, I can see that this is really overwhelming you. I understand why you don't want to talk about this. I know this is uncomfortable. And then there comes a really important word, and, right? I know this is uncomfortable and we still need to talk about it. I can see you're anxious and we need to figure out what the next step is. I understand you're angry with me and this boundary is not changing. That is very different from, I can see you're upset, so let's pretend this problem doesn't exist, right? Compassion and accountability can exist in the same conversation. So here's a question. What do you find yourself avoiding because you're afraid of how your adult child might react? This might be the biggest mind shift for you today. The goal isn't always to keep everybody calm. Because sometimes, a lot of the times, most of the time, growth is uncomfortable. And sometimes an important conversation is uncomfortable. Sometimes having to hear something we don't want to hear is uncomfortable. Sometimes taking responsibility is uncomfortable, right? So instead of saying, how do I keep them calm? Try asking, how can I stay calm while they experience this emotion? That's a completely different job, right? Completely different job title, job description. It's not how do I keep them comfortable? It's how do you stay calm when they're experiencing heavy emotions, right? You don't have to fix their anxiety. You can say, like, be in that mindset where you say, I can stay with you while you're anxious. I don't have to make your disappointment disappear. I can care about you while you're disappointed. I don't have to remove your frustration. I can remain calm and connected while you're frustrated. You see? So you don't have to abandon an important conversation simply because the conversation creates discomfort. All right. So what does this sound like? Consider this. Maybe your adult child starts getting overwhelmed when you bring something up, right? That's a common scenario for most parents. Instead of immediately backing away, I want you to try saying something else, right? Your version of this, but you could say, I can see this is really upsetting you, and I'm not trying to attack you, and we don't have to solve everything in the next 5 minutes, but this is something we need to talk about, right? You've got to keep the conversation going. You have to keep the emphasis on this is not going away. We are not going to avoid, right? And that might be that you can't talk about it in that moment because they're doing their thing. They're like, oh my gosh, you're talking to me. And then they get anxious or they yell or they get angry or tense. And what they're kind of conditioned is the same dance, right? So I get upset. We're not going to have to deal with this or, whatever the thing is. And you're going to show them, no, that's not how it's going to go. But maybe they're too upset in that moment. So you make that statement and then you come back to it later, right? And you might have to go through that a few cycles for them to realize like, okay, we're doing things different, all right? Mom, dad, grandma, they're not doing the same dance. They change this whole dance and I don't know these moves, right? And that's where you stay compassionate. That's where you stay in that mode of, I don't have to fix this for you and we're not going to avoid it, but we are going to address it, right? We are going to move forward. So that's where you say things like, look, I can tell you're angry with me right now, and that is okay. You don't have to agree with me, but this is still going to be the boundary, right? This is still something that you have to own. This is still something that we're going to work on. Notice what's happening there. You are not escalating. You are not shaming, and you're not abandoning them. Now, they may escalate. They may feel shame. They may blame you and say you're abandoning them, but that's not what you're doing, right? You are not the cause of their emotion, right? The reality of the situation that they have been avoiding is the cause of their emotion, right? It brings up what they're really feeling inside, and they see you as the one who is not letting them avoid, right? Making them deal with it, right? So I want you to hear that. That might be the biggest thing I'm saying today, right? Is that you do not cause their emotions. They're already there, right? They've been escaping them, and you have perhaps been put into a role in a position where you're trying to help them, but you ended up helping them avoid what was really going on inside of them, right? So this is a really important, right? You're not allowing emotions to decide what happens next. All right. If you recognize yourself in that story about coffee, here's something I want you to think about. Am I supporting my adult child through their emotions? Or have I become responsible for preventing them to experience those emotions? Right? Do you feel responsible? Right? Or are you learning to support them through the emotions? Those are the distinctions. We want to move away from feeling responsible and avoiding, and the number one goal being keep the peace. Because I tell you, when a parent's main goal, whether that is intentional or just how they end up doing with their behaviors, when the main goal is to protect from the emotions, right? To keep the peace, right? It's out of balance, right? It moves into that keeping things stuck, because these are very two different things, right? Sitting with them through their emotions, helping them work through them, right? That helps them grow, right? If you avoid and you participate in that avoidance, you're unintentionally reinforcing the idea that I can't handle this feeling, or somebody needs to step in and help me make it stop. Right? That's not what we want. So I'm going to wrap up this talk, but I want you to remember, right? Like the mother in this story, right? And if you didn't hear it, go back to it, right? But the mother in the story I told wasn't doing anything because she didn't care. She was doing it because she cared so much, right? She wanted her son to feel better. She wanted him to have a good day. She wanted him to believe in himself. She wanted him to move forward. But eventually, she had to recognize that keeping him comfortable wasn't helping him become capable, right? The coffee wasn't the problem. The connection wasn't the problem. The compassion wasn't the problem. The problem was when keeping the peace became more important than dealing with reality. So, look, keep making coffee or your version of that for your kid, right? Keep connecting with them. Keep listening. Keep showing compassion. But don't be afraid of every uncomfortable feeling, right? You can care about how your adult child feels without making it your responsibility to make those feelings go away, right? Sometimes the most loving thing that you're going to do is not to say, hey, let me make this feel better. Right? I know that feels loving, but sometimes that's not truly the most loving thing. Let me make this feel better. Sometimes the most loving thing is saying, I know this is hard. I'm here with you, and I believe you can work through it, but we're not avoiding. So the question I'll leave you with is keeping the peace helping your adult child move forward? Or is keeping the peace keeping everyone stuck? All right, let me say that again. Is keeping the peace helping your adult child move forward? Or is keeping the peace keeping everyone stuck? right? Or somewhere in between, right? I want you to think about that. And I don't want anyone to feel blamed. I don't want any parent to feel shame, right? Sometimes, we have these talks and you realize, okay, I'm doing that. And then you have your own hard emotions. I want you to work through those emotions, right? I want you to look at that and say, okay, why am I feeling this? And what do I need to do with it? Right? And that can be your growth, right? How do you have that compassion, but also not avoid things, right? You're probably going to have to work through some things yourself as a parent because you care about your kid, right? And you don't want to see them struggle. You don't want to see them hurt. You don't want to see them overwhelmed. But what's the most loving thing you can do for them, right? And if you're struggling with that, please get on the email list, right? There are supports and help for that. When there's just, that's a great place to go. And get on the Facebook community, right? That the parents of adult children failure to launch. The links are in the descriptions and all that kind of stuff. That is a great community to connect. It's growing. It's getting more active. And I'm believing in good things with that group. So thank you for watching today. I'm going to be back tomorrow, Friday. It will be our last in this series of this week. I would love your comments, right? If there's something that you want to suggestion or question, or even if you disagree, right? We can disagree, right? Let's work it out. Let's talk about it. Let's make things clear. All right. Thank you very much. I will talk to you guys tomorrow and spread the word that there is help, right? Tell them about where they can get that connection. All right. And let me look just in case there was any chat. Oops. There was some. I didn't see it at first. Mary Jane, keeping the peace helps me as a parent feel safe. That is a really good point. If you're still there, Mary Jane, and I will add that at the end of that. That is a real thing, right? I have heard parents. It's usually that pattern that has escalated over time, many times over, where things tend to build. Right, an emotion is counteracted by another emotion. We're going to talk about this, and sometimes your children can get in a pattern of, if I show enough emotion, if I show enough aggression, if I can be loud enough, I can get things to back down. And that's not always intentional, right? Sometimes they just kind of like what they've learned, like anything. It's almost like a survival, almost like a panic type thing. Like, I cannot deal with this, and they feel backed in a corner, or they've just learned, like, I'm just going to escalate to the point because I just can't deal with this. I'm not going to talk about it. And sometimes that can even be where they start throwing stuff, they start punching stuff, or even push a parent, restrain a parent. Those things happen, right? And I'm not going to get into that whole topic today. I think that's a more in-depth, almost case-by-case situation, because I want anyone to be safe. I never want you to confront, challenge a situation when it's becoming literally unsafe. But there are ways to move past that, right? There are like different ways and times to have that conversation. And a lot of times it needs to be addressed in a different time than the heat of the moment. So, but that's a very good point, right? For some parents, they're literally worried about, safety, right? Is my kid going to hurt themselves? Are they going to hurt me? Are they going to destroy property? And for some of them, they will go to that level to not deal with what's going on, right? But as long as they believe that works, because it has been working, they're likely going to continue it. And so that's where parents need a lot of guidance moving through those moments. And that's what we're doing. We're giving more guidance. So thank you, Marianne, for your comments. And I appreciate everyone. And let me just double check there wasn't any others on here. I don't see any. So I know most of you are watching this afterwards and late. So give me a comment and I will respond to it later. And that's all good. So I need to finish up. I got to get to another meeting. You guys have a great day, and God bless.